Welcome to Highguard.
Highguard.
Highguard is forever.
Oh, furry!
Hate the game, not the player. This mentality seems to have cemented itself in modern gaming, and I think no other game has suffered this problem quite as hard as Highguard. Revealed at the Game Awards, practically against the developers' wishes, Highguard suffered from a success it was meant only to have after the team were done fine-tuning the experience. Ignoring the numbers, it has been confirmed that Highguard is here to stay, and I think it can quite easily cement itself as a fun in-between game for people looking for the Apex experience grounded in fantasy and riding horses. As far as the developer's vision goes, I think they achieved it quite well, bringing a fresh new take on the first-person shooter genre, bringing together a lot of different themes from different games, such as the search and destroy employment that Valorant relies on, as well as the gunplay and movement experience that you can find in games like Apex Legends, without ever having to compromise on one of those aspects. However, I also believe that this tends to be Highguard's downfall, with a lot of people feeling like these ideas haven't been fleshed out well enough for the game to have had a full release so early. In a way, Highguard feels like it has been released in its beta, and I actually think that's a much better take on the game in the current standing that it has. So, what could Highguard have possibly done to get the entire world in such a twist? Stay tuned because we're about to talk about the... For those that are unaware, Highguard is a multi-stage, raid, first-person shooter with inspirations from games like Search and Destroy found in Call of Duty, and hero shooters specifically like Apex Legends, where a lot of the game draws inspiration from, due to the developers having come from an Apex Legends background. The game, at the moment, is juggling a lot from the start with mechanics that seem quite shallow, although it is to be expected from a game that's essentially in its beta stages from the looks of it. The way you would play Highguard is you would get into your game, you'd start your reinforce phase where you can strengthen the walls. I think a lot of people are downplaying what the reinforcement does, and while true it is not that significant that it is essential, it can cause delays in attackers that are unprepared to face a reinforced wall. Then you will move into your farm/scavenge stage, where you will be looking for loot in the game found in these blue crystals, as well as trying to find weapons and shield upgrades present in loot boxes scattered around the map. Once you have farmed up and gotten the required equipment to succeed, you will then begin your skirmish. The skirmish is a infinitely respawning mode where your shield breaker spawns, which is this really cool looking lightning sword that you pick up with your team, which then you have to carry to the enemy's base in order to begin a raid. The cool part about the skirmish is the fact that it's a free-for-all, in the sense of either team can start the raid depending on the result of the skirmish, and there are actually quite intense moments where you will actually defeat the enemy team, but they will clutch it back, and the raid may start on your base or their base, depending on who is successful. Congrats! You have just inserted the giant sword into the enemy's base, causing a raid to begin. Your shield breaker will spawn, causing a battering ram to take down the energy shield defending the enemy's base, which will allow you to begin fighting for point A, point B, and the central pillar. This will allow you to plant bombs where your goal is to detonate them and the enemy team's goal is to stop you from doing that. It should be noted that every single time a bomb is planted on a site, the actual amount of time that the bomb needs to take down for decreases, resulting in really high octane situations where you must make sure that you are on the correct site at all times in order to prevent the bomb from exploding. Once the bomb has exploded, or once the attacker's lives have been drained, which every attacker gets to spawn 6 times each, I believe, you'd be surprised how quickly you run out of lives. The game repeats itself based on what a site you destroyed. Sometimes the game can end really quickly depending on balancing, where your team will just destroy the central pillar, resulting in a victory. Other times it can result in this really long back and forth, where both teams take a site out one by one. You start at 100 health and your base loses 30 health every time a raid begins, and then 35 health every time a site is destroyed. Meaning that you can end up in situations where you've got 5 health remaining, and whoever wins the next skirmish wins the game. If you wish to learn more about the Wardens, or the playable characters present in Highguard, I'm not going to go through them. All you need to know is that I like playing Mara because I think she's cool, and there are plenty of other videos that will criticize the character design. People say they're forgettable, and whilst I can understand the criticisms of having 8 humanoid characters be in the game with somewhat repetitive powers from different games, I do want people to give these characters a chance. You've got to keep in mind that Highguard definitely doesn't feel like it had the budget of games like Valorant or Apex, where you could create character stories and develop them, but even these games had to start somewhere. I think with time, if played correctly, you could create likable wardens and build on their backstories, resulting in players having a easier and better experience when it comes to inserting themselves into the characters they're playing as. But for the time being, as far as Highguard goes, I think the wardens do a perfectly good job at getting you from point A to point B in fashion. As you can tell, these features are a lot for a single dev team to handle. Most of these games will select one feature such as a battle royale, a raid game, a search and destroy mission, and focus on that to perfect the gameplay experience, whereas Highguard wants to be all of these combined, making for a much more complex but much more rewarding time with the game. I think in time it would be beneficial for the developers to decide what direction they want to take Highguard in, but for the time being, we should make the most of the game that we have at hand. Before we get into the ways I think the developers can improve Highguard, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for showing up. There is a sea of better, higher quality content creators out there making videos on Highguard, so I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. As with everyone else, I'd really appreciate it if you could, like and subscribe to let me know that you enjoyed the content and want to see more. But if not, I just appreciate you watching this video to begin with, so thank you for that. I just want to make a really quick disclaimer. I am not a game developer. I have no idea how difficult it would be for the game to change in the way I would like for it to change, but I am here to give some criticism, some healthy feedback, which I really haven't seen the community give. A lot of people are upset that the game isn't to their standards, but you haven't actually set a standard for what you want the game to be, which I find to be very unintuitive for the developers to work on. So I'm just going to go through what I think would take the game in a healthy direction and what I think the changes the developers should focus on are. Make sure to comment the changes you'd like to see to Highguard down below, and if you disagree with anything, please let me know. I will read every single comment that's left down there. Change number 1, something has to go. I think there is just too many steps into getting the cycle of Highguard going, so I think we should either get rid of the reinforcement stage and make all walls start reinforced. We should get rid of one of the farming/scavenging mechanics, or we should introduce a system where you create the loadout before you get into the game so you can attune it to the type of character you play with and the type of playstyle you want to engage with. For example, Scarlet is an assassin by nature. Her abilities let her get in up and close, go through walls, go invisible. It'd be really healthy to allow people to select like the Viper, maybe the shotguns in the game in order to get in with people and just burst them down. Then, based off the fact that you have a prerequisite loadout, you can then upgrade that loadout on successful attacks or defense. And I actually think there's a really, really cool way you could balance this out. Also, now that you've gotten rid of having to spawn loot around the map and having to farm, you can spend more resources in making the upgrades of the weapons more meaningful, so that the jump from white to blue feels a lot more satisfying, from blue to purple, from purple to orange. These should be such monumental game changers that they can decide the type of battle as soon as they happen. Improvement number 2, in my opinion, would be upgrading the way success and failure is treated in this game. Whenever you win a raid right now, there is very little reward for the winning team other than the fact that they've dealt damage to the enemy tower. Maybe they've tilted the people playing the game, but there's no feasible upgrade. You don't get more resources, you don't get a faster upgrade, you don't get more powerful for winning, you just get the satisfaction of being the better player, which has its own space. However, I think you could take the game in a great direction by making the game reward you based on whether you succeed or fail the raid by, if you win the skirmish that results in you getting the shield breaker and you start the raid and your raid is successful, you have now caused the enemy team to lose health. The enemy team will now get upgraded shields, upgraded mount speeds, upgraded things to help them play more defensively in order to prepare for the position of being attacked, whereas you will get an extra tier on your weapon. It will go from white to blue. Your weapon will get more thoughtful upgrades because there's less time being spent on doing loot distribution and more time being spent on thinking how we can make the game and the weapon better when we go from white to blue, from blue to purple, from purple to orange. This also creates a healthy tug-of-war back and forth dynamic between the two teams currently playing the game. Yes, congratulations, you were the better team, you dealt damage, but now you are the underdog. Yes, you've got the higher quality weapon, but it doesn't deal any more damage. Maybe you've got a bit of extra sights where it can prepare you for the battle by having slightly more ammunition, but you have just been turned into the underdog, the team that needs to work even harder to succeed. but that will create a sense of satisfaction when you know you're struggling, but you get the win anyways. You are building up a story in the minds of the players to get them to engage with the game in a way they've never engaged before. And adding these gameplay dynamics, the back and forth, the tug of war, is what will get people to really grip and bond with Highguard. Last but definitely not least, because of the changes I've mentioned previously, the current map layout doesn't work. Because a singular raid can result in the game ending almost instantaneously, I will admit, when this happened to me in the first game I played and I was victorious, I guarantee it did not feel satisfying for me and it did not feel satisfying for the enemy team. And as a result of this, I suggest that instead of having a central base with point A, B and a central, you do sort of a Hunger Games Section 1, Section 2, and then the central tower. This causes the games to last a little bit longer, yes, and it does mean that there's only ever one plane of attack, one site of attack, yes, but it also means that the goal you're working towards is a lot better laid out in your mind. You know, okay, we need to strike point A, we need to strike point B, and then we need to strike the central point. This also means that when a raid begins, instead of destroying a singular segment of the enemy's base, you can actually take out the entire wall defending Site A, Site B, and Site C, which will result in the actual attackers having much more entry points and a much smoother experience. Because right now, if the defensive team is good, you are not destroying any sites. You will not get in far enough, which isn't satisfying. Also, for anyone complaining that 3v3 isn't enough, the sites you fight on are so small that making it 4v4 or 5v5 would mean that one team will always get swamped. Because if 3 people are fighting 5 people and 2 people are defending sites, you don't have the space, the movement, or the dynamics of a tactical shooter, quote unquote, like Valorant. Because there, you can distribute your team equally to defend the site as soon as the game begins. Quick side note after recording this. Turns out everything I said is completely wrong now because the developers have just added a 5v5 game mode. But good for them. They're listening to the community. You gotta give them that. You can't have people going out, getting the sword, defending the site. It just... Because of the way Highguard is built, you need to have it be a 3v3 raid defense shooter. Thank you for watching. I appreciated you making it this far. I just want to disclose that the creators of Highguard hold full creative freedom of the game itself. They can do whatever they want with it. I'm just a loady YouTuber trying to give my opinion on a game that I actually really enjoy. If you haven't played Highguard yet, I suggest giving it a chance. It's really fun, especially now with the 5v5 game mode. That might make the game feel a bit more fast-paced, maybe a bit better balanced. I guess time will tell. Either way, I wish the developers nothing but the best, and yeah, have a good one.